Make ready for marriage. This is a challenging talk for many reasons. It's just such a short amount of time for a gigantic topic. So I will just dive in and pray that you pick up some valuable morsels to chew on after we leave here. Please ask a lot of questions at the end. About a decade ago, I remember a lot of talk within some winsome evangelical circles from people like the late Tim Keller that it was important for the church to be sure not to alienate single people within the congregation. Too much emphasis about marriage and family would make single people feel less than and basically would kick people when they were down. The assumption was correctly that most single people did not want to be single, and so the church needed to do a better job at letting them know they were a valuable part of the church and reminding them that Jesus was single, so let's don't equate finding a spouse with completing us as a person. And there's a lot of truth there, I suppose, because single people do have a lot to contribute to the church. And they're not second-class citizens of the kingdom of God. And it's true that we can make an idol of a spouse or the pursuit of a spouse, but tiptoeing around people's feelings has led to many negative results, including one would be paving the way for homosexuality to be approved within the church as long as they are merely same-sex attracted, but they never act on their homosexual urges. Or the other more common and maybe more damaging on the whole, the implication of telling people that singleness is a gift from God. That's something the Bible never says. It regards singleness as an affliction for the most part. And so with that what happens is that young people in the church look a lot like following the trends broadly in the world, such as delaying marriage, maybe even indefinitely so, while they're fornicating virtually or in real life, or they're delaying having children if they're not killing them. And so for the sake of their feelings for a while in large sectors of evangelicalism, singles have not been strongly urged to seek marriage or family or counseled to consider getting married at a younger age if they have a desire to do so. And I think it's time to change that. The Apostle Paul was a single man, perhaps widowed, though it was likely he was at one time married, and specially set apart for the dangerous work of the first century itinerant missionary work. It was also a time of persecution for the church when Paul is believed to have written to the Corinthian church addressing some unknown questions about marriage which were asked. So he says, starting in 1 Corinthians 7, verse 7, I wish that all were as I myself am, but each has his own gift from God, for one of one kind and one of another. To the unmarried and the widows I say that it is good for them to remain single as I am. But if they cannot exercise self-control, they should marry, for it is better to marry than to burn with passion. Paul here is referring to celibacy as a gift that he possesses. Celibacy. That is essentially that he does not have the normal desires or urges for sexual gratification from a wife within the bonds of marriage. And this freedom from this very normal desire is useful to him because he does not have to worry about a family back home as he's going out and getting beaten and jailed and shipwrecked. But he counsels those unmarried people, both men and women, to marry because it is not good to burn with passion. And many of you young men in here know very well what it means to have this burning. A few in here might be a little young, but give it a few years and you will start to understand what Paul is saying about the desire to find a good woman, marry her, have sex with her, and make babies in that order, please. Because that's God's order for how this thing needs to go. God designed all of this, and sexual attraction, and sexual intimacy, and sexual reproduction. These are all incredibly good gifts that God has given to man for his good. Your level of intimacy with a woman must reflect your level of commitment to her. And so if you want to be like Adam and Eve before the fall, naked and unashamed with each other, you need to get that. You get that when you covenant before God that you will take responsibility for this woman, come hell or high water until one of you dies. That is the God-ordained design for marriage. It is a self-sacrificial bond between one man and one woman for life, full stop. So if you are wondering if you have the gift of celibacy, I'll ask this question. Do you want to have sex with a woman? If the answer is yes, then you do not have that gift of celibacy. I say all this because I want you to take hold of these two truths to start. One, marriage is normative. And two, marriage is a good thing. By normative, I mean that according to Jesus' own words in Matthew 19, the normal practice for men and women is for sons of Adam and daughters of Eve to seek a single marital partner for a lifelong union. Quoting Matthew 19, 4 through 6, and he answered and said, "Have you not read that he who created them from the beginning made them male and female? And said, for this reason shall a man leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh? So they are no longer two, but one flesh. What therefore God has joined together, let no man separate." And this is done because God has purposes for his image bearers on the earth. He has prepared good works in advance for us to do. And what are these good works? At their core, they are what we call the dominion mandate, to be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and rule over every aspect of it, as God says in Genesis 1. From an eternal perspective, marriage between a particular man and a particular woman is not all there is to life, meaning that we know that Jesus teaches us that in the life to come, in the resurrection, we will not be married in this eternal resurrected state. That's Matthew 22:30. But we can trust that whatever the nature is of that life to come, that state will be far better than we can even imagine now. And for those rare individuals that God calls to remain single and celibate for his special mission purposes, like Paul, marriage is not necessary to be perfectly within the particular will of God for their lives. For those called to be eunuchs for the sake of the kingdom of heaven, Matthew 19:12, they are not in sin by not marrying. But while marriage is not all there is to life, it is essential to life itself. Humanity cannot survive without fruitful marriage. So marriage is an inherently good institution, the first one that God established for man in creation before the fall and long before the Mosaic law. Marriage is a good that God established and is recognized by both those who fear him and those who deny him. The goodness of marriage is why demonic forces are constantly attacking and attempting to pervert it. So no more caveats. I'm speaking now about the rule, not the exceptions. There's enough nuance. Marriage is crucial to your mission as a man. You will not accomplish much of eternal significance or legacy by remaining single. It is not good for man to be alone, as God said in the garden. Who you marry may be the most consequential decision that you can make that will affect the trajectory of your life. And how you lead and care for your wife will either result in the greatest blessings or the greatest curses for not just you, but for your children and for generations to come. Just because marriage, as God defines it, is a good thing, it can go badly. You can wreck it. It can wreck you. Not everything in a marriage is the fault of the husband, but it becomes his responsibility to deal with the results of sin and folly in a godly manner, since he is the head of the marriage. Marriage will make you who you are. Some guys in their 20s or even 30s are concerned that they aren't yet ready to have a wife because they lack maturity. Friend, you are right to believe you aren't as mature as you ought to be. But you know what grows you up real quick? Marriage. Same with kids after you're married. You never feel ready to start having kids, but turns out when you have them, you start figuring things out rather rapidly. Marriage is a gift from God for the mutual sanctification of the husband and wife. Sometimes you see old married couples, and they really start to look alike. and this is a real thing, at least on the spiritual level. You will shape each other, for better or for worse. Most people think that they will be able to change some things about their spouse once they get married. They're partially right. But I would not be the man I am today if not for the influence of my wife. And she would not be who she is if not for me. We got married when she had just turned 19 and I was 24. We were pretty young, especially her. And that was a blessing to me especially. There was a handoff from my wife to her, from her father's house to my house, that I was now starting with her and figuring things out along the way. We have influenced each other's worldviews and theology, and I can confidently say I'm far better for having married her. Marriage holds up a mirror to us all and exposes all our unseemly traits and flaws. This is sanctification. There are some books that, the title or the subtitle are sufficient to give us like one great big idea. And one such book, which actually I have not ever read, was Gary Thomas wrote a book called Sacred Marriage, and the subtitle asks the million-dollar question: what if God designed marriage to make us holy more than make us happy. The world has no category for holiness, and that's what sanctification means. The world is interested in things that make us feel good, that are therapeutic, and if the reasons we get married are of the feel-good variety, because we're in love and she's beautiful and we have common interests and everyone's healthy and wealthy, well, what happens when the happy feelings start to wear off because the novelty of marriage wanes and the circumstances change and life gets hard and she gets sick and gains weight? The world says that we should remove toxic people from our lives because they don't bring us happiness. So do we throw away our spouse and get a divorce and try again? Or maybe we should just forego the hassle of ripping a household apart through divorce by never getting married in the first place. This is why marriage must be understood as a solemn, sacred bond, a covenant before God, between two people. The traditional vows are as such: to have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness or in health, to love and to cherish, till death do us part, according to God's holy ordinance. It is in the worst times that we must remember our pledge to our wives before God. It is in the poorer times that we learn to rely more on God's provision for our families. It is in the sickness times that God teaches us about mercy and compassion. These are the things that God will use to make us holy, more like Jesus. How can a young man make ready for marriage? He must consciously be about becoming a man worth marrying. Use the time before you are married to make serious preparations and challenge yourself to tackle more than you're comfortable doing. Before you are married, you can take some risks with your career or even the kind of adventures that you find yourself going on that are going to be far less prudent once you have a wife and children who are relying on you for your stability in your presence and in your provision and in your protection. So, guys, live in such a way that as a single man, that a woman could happily see herself joining you in your mission and in your home. If you are slovenly and undisciplined in your daily schedule or the way you keep your home, that is not an encouragement to a potential wife. If you have no sense of direction and purpose, you will need to do some serious soul searching before God before you dare invite a wife to partake of your life. Gain hard skills so that you can maintain a home and a vehicle. If you are shy and lack confidence, you will need to force yourself to do hard things until you have mastery over some tasks, and put yourself in social situations where you must sink or swim. Are you earning your own money? Are you on a path that can eventually support more than just yourself, or are you in some dead-end minimum wage position? A married man must provide for his household, not relying on the government dole. Are you part of a church and accountable to other men, or are you trying to be a lone ranger? Do you have any friends? Are you overweight? Are you addicted to porn? You must put to death the vices that keep you enslaved. Be an interested person, interested in learning from other people and developing unique talents, and you will be an interesting person to get to know. Many people want to meet a marriage partner around common interests, whether that be a recreational activity or a football team, or something superficial like that. Common interests are nice, but they are not the foundation for an enduring marriage. A common Christian worldview and love for Christ must be the foundation of marriage, or I have low expectations that things will go well. The average age people get married anymore is getting older and older, and this is not good. I'm not saying that a guy getting married at 18 is necessarily a wise move. A lot of that depends on whether he is able to provide financially for his wife, and most 18-year-old men are not quite there yet. But I do encourage getting married earlier than later. I also see many advantages to marrying a woman somewhat younger than you. I know this from experience. Ask me about this later. When I met my wife and she was about to start college, I was about to finish college, I fully expected her parents to say that we needed to wait until she graduated to get married. That's a pretty common expectation among the college-going crowd, I think. Imagine my surprise and delight to find that that was not an expectation from her parents. And we got married while my wife was still in school. It can be done. And remember, it's better to marry than to burn. If you know you found the woman you want to commit to for the rest of your life and you yourself are ready, I strongly advise you to have a conversation with her dad and propose. And then, please, do not have a long extended engagement. Because if you were burning before, as soon as you put a ring on it, the fuel supply goes way up on that fire. And a long dating relationship or a long engagement is a recipe for fornication and regrets. Once you are old enough to be out of your parents' house, the longer you wait to pursue marriage, the fewer good options you have. As the pool of available women gets smaller as your age and theirs increases, there are reasons the better options dwindle, speaking frankly. These may be that they have been in and out of multiple relationships with sexual baggage, or children that they will bring into a potential marriage, or they have been amassing debt through unnecessary higher education degrees, or they have been focused on building their own career, a path which is often hard to steer away from and usually has a fair amount of feminism baked in. Often we may wonder if God has the one picked out for us, and how can we identify if we meet the one, and how can we stand the agonizing suspense when we're waiting for God to reveal the one? Is this even a right way to think? Yes and no. Because God is sovereign and because it is normative that we will find a wife, it is true that God, in his omniscience and orchestration, has a particular girl already ordained for you who is somewhere out there walking around on this very planet. And that's an exciting thought. At the same time, I don't recommend thinking about looking for a wife like that, because it opens us up to a kind of superstitious thinking and trying to peer into the secret will of God. We want to be looking around according not to God's secret will, but according to his revealed will, that is according to the scriptures. So that, what are the search parameters to find a potential wife? First and foremost, if you are a Christian, you must only marry a Christian woman. To be knowingly unequally yoked to a non-believer is folly of the highest order, no matter how much you think you'll be able to convert her. God alone saves, and you're not God. But you are a first-rate fool if you enter into marriage with someone who is not regenerate. A good marriage requires an enormous level of trust in the other person, which takes years to build up. Worshiping the same God with the same set of standards for evaluating reality sets you both on the same footing for dealing with sin when you sin against one another. And this cannot be comprehended by a non-Christian. All other considerations then will rank lower than the fundamental question: does this girl know Christ is Lord? But to help in this consideration of who would make a good wife, I do have some final questions. Keep in mind, though, that these must all be asked of yourself first. Be the kind of man a good woman would want to marry. I think that's my underlined part. Here are some questions. Will she follow your lead? Or does she want to pursue her own ambition? And then the corollary to that is, are you able to lead? Are you following Christ's ambitions over your own? 2, does she want kids? Do you? Is she growing in maturity in the Lord, even if a newer believer? Are you? What's her family of origin like? This will influence your marriage, just like yours will. Are you willing to take full responsibility over all that she brings into the marriage? Her sin isn't your fault, but she is your responsibility. And asking yourself, are you taking full responsibility for your own actions? Does she understand that God places her husband in authority over her? Do you? How does she honor her father? And how do you honor yours? Does she have wisdom and seek it out? Are you doing that? Is she intelligent and value education? Because she's going to raise your kids and run your home. Do you value education this way? Does she have a sense of humor? Humor is incredibly important in life. And do you? How does she handle hardship or a sudden change in plans? How about you? Who does she look to for guidance? Online influencers or godly older people? How about you? What does she fill her day thinking about? Is it trends, entertainment, career, gossip, complaining, her own problems, self-help, her body? Or things that are valuable in the sight of God? And what about you? So one last thing, and I have many more thoughts on this and other topics I've brushed on here concerning marriage, but someone might ask, where can I meet a girl that is worth marrying? It's $1 million question. And I understand that it's very difficult for Christian guys seeking a wife these days. So we'll have to think about that, discuss that. But I'll say this much. God works in mysterious ways, and you never know in what circumstance you might meet your wife. But I have a hot tip for you, and it's along the lines of the legendary quote by one Willie Sutton, a famous robber, who was asked why he robbed banks, and his reply is, "That's where the money is." So where should you at least first go to try to find a good Christian woman? Go to church, dummy. That's where the God-fearing women are, and they're there at the same time every Sunday. And if you can't find one at your own church, you might need to look in another church, but that's your first filter. If you want a girl who loves Jesus, start looking in his house. That worked for me. Okay. Any questions? And Andrew, if you want to be the runner of the mic up here. Questions or thoughts, please. There's got to be something. Is it on?
What would you say to a young man pursuing marriage as in regards to being a masculine head of his family versus being a tyrant?
Be very, well, this is kind of a fraught question. I mean, I would advise everyone who's a young man and the parents are still alive, especially if they're Christians, even if they're not. I mean, your parent, it says honor your father and your mother. It doesn't say obey them. It says honor them. Now, children are to obey their parents, but we're always supposed to honor, however old you get, you honor. And that's difficult. That can be very difficult for a dad or a mother who aren't walking with the Lord, and you are. But do the best you can. But seek input. Be very circumspect about who you look to as a role model. If your own parents are not, if your own dad is something of a tyrant, then you're probably going to look somewhere else in the church. But look for people your kids are your report card in life. They reflect what you value and how you raise them. So if you see somebody whose kids are godly offspring, that's a good sign that guy's probably not a tyrant in his home. Sometimes it can be hard to tell because people sneak up on you or whatever. I think that there's a lot of stuff out there in the manosphere. Now, I don't really use that term, but I know that that's a thing, like online. There's lots of pagans who want to, Andrew Tate would be the first guy who comes to mind, who has had an evolution on some things. Maybe I heard him say, Jesus is Lord, but I'm not sure what that means to him. I wouldn't go to him for advice. But we are supposed to be very self-sacrificial and love your life like Christ loves the church, and Jesus isn't a tyrant. The head of the household is not the boss. Doug Wilson has written a lot of good books on marriage. I guess we didn't have a copy of that to give away here today, but he's got a book called How to Exasperate Your Wife. I like that one a lot. It's short essays. Actually, it's not actually to exasperate your wife. It is quite the opposite, but it's a funny, hook. And you have. It's been said here a few times. I mean, your wife is a weaker vessel, but your wife also. He uses the kind of the terminology that you need to let her be the CEO of your home, so that she can manage the domain, the God-given domain of the home, in the ways that she observes are wise. That's a complicated kind of thing, but for a young man, I mean, if you're the one raising him, don't you be a tyrant. And I mean, you have to. It takes a lot of humility. Like I said, the marriage holds up a mirror, and you see the flaws. And hopefully, your wife is godly and will offers you some gentle correction if you've been a jerk. But the main way to not be a tyrant is you have to be willing to ask forgiveness, repent and ask forgiveness from your children or your wife or whoever. When you sin, you have to just act like a Christian, and Christians repent and ask forgiveness. Please forgive me. And it's not too much to ask your 3-year-old for forgiveness if you've, blasted them and, flipped out on something that shouldn't have been flipped out about. I don't know. Does that help a little bit? Yes.
You mentioned marrying or pursuing older women than you
Younger
are.
women.
No, that being not a good thing.
Well,
What's the reasoning behind that?
my rationale. I've known, I have a brother-in-law who married a woman who's a few years older than him, and they have a good marriage. I would say it's advantageous to marry younger women because just simply from a biological standpoint, she has a biological clock of not being able to have babies for forever. And at the age that people are getting married later and later, if you want to have a large home, or sometimes people have fertility issues or whatever the situation may be, it might take some time to have kids, to build your family up. If you want to maximize that potential, that alone is just one particular reason. But the other reason is because I had gone through some of the reasons about the option. There's more options earlier on. I don't mean, obviously, you should, if you're 18, like, don't be pursuing a 15-year-old. Like, you shouldn't, think about common sense here, guys. But an age differential can be smart, or can be just a delight. Especially, like I said, if she's raised in a really strong Christian home, there's a handoff there from her, under her father's protection, to your protection, without some kind of like decade of being an independent woman. That is where you're potentially going to have, like I said, baggage from other relationships that she's been in, potentially children, disease. And it's wonderful to be able to marry a virgin. Let me say this. Some guys have lived a very non-chaste lifestyle in their younger years, and then they are ready to get married, and then they have an expectation that they're going to also be able to marry a virgin. Maybe you will. You have to be willing to understand what you've been forgiven. If I've not lived like a chaste life, how can I demand that or expect that from somebody else who's my similar age or has gone through some stuff? So it's just, that's where grace comes in. Like, it's nice to not have to have an experienced woman to deal with, because that experience is not going to, that's just going to complicate things and have all kinds of wounds and complexities within especially the marriage bed, but other just in terms of expectations and living. And when you can kind of establish your home from the ground up, where you're not building on some kind of mixed, foundation of that is partially already been built by someone else. But people come from all kinds of different household backgrounds, and there are many godly women who Jesus has, made regenerated, and they're walking with the Lord, and they do have a kid. And I'm not saying that they're not, worth marrying, but you really just have to see what is. Am I thinking about this like a Christian? There is grace. You can have a new start, but there are practical realities that you can't necessarily go back in time and redo. So that I'm just saying that, like, there are some advantages to marrying someone not older than yourself, because I don't know, you can kind of build that life together in the way that God is knitting you together. Yes.
Just to clarify something with his question, you're not saying like 3 days older or a month older.
My wife and I have a 5-year gap between.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm just clarifying.
When I was in school, like in high school or even younger, you start to look about like who you want to date, and you just like look within your own class, because you're in like a K through 12 structure. It's like, I'm I'm in ninth grade. I guess I need to, see if this first of all, it's not advisable. But you're just looking, but I'm just saying, like, look, dating, that's a whole other topic, and we can talk more about that later. But if you have this kind of very narrow search band, and you don't think about, like, so much about dating or pursuing a girl who's of a different age strata, that's kind of just like a result of the public education system. But once you actually become an adult, you realize that doesn't really matter that much. And if you find a godly woman and she's not married and she's a few years older than you, that's not like I can't do this just because some dude said something sometime. It could be fine. But I'm just saying, like, don't filter your search pattern like so narrowly, because it's very hard to find a good godly woman. Just like they're probably good godly women are sometimes finding it hard to find a good man to marry. So the church, can help each other out by, Kevin, you had said when people are trying to set you up with that. I'm not saying like we need a matchmaker like the old Jewish communities or something like that, but we do well to older couples maybe invite 20-somethings over to their home, maybe in groups or something like that, kind of essentially make mixers. I think that the singles mixers is a great idea that some of the Christian conferences, Reformed conferences, are kind of doing, because they know that they want to encourage people to meet, and it's hard to find people to meet. We didn't even get into the online thing. And I don't have any personal experience with that, but I know that some people have had success with online dating, and a lot of people have not, and it can be frustrated by that. So I got married 17 years ago, and the world has changed a lot. And I want to have as much compassion as I can muster for the travail that I know guys are going through right now of trying to find that woman. Okay, I'm going to leave it there. Oh. Okay, make it quick.
I was wondering do you think it's kind of presumptive to think that you're actually going to mature if you're immature? Like, I'm just looking at myself.
Are you going to be able to be pure if you're immature?
No, mature. Like,
that you're
said,
going
like,
to be
marriage
mature?
is the way you get to maturity. Is it a little presumptuous, or do you actually want to make sure that
Before you're married?
Yeah.
Well, maturity. When do you arrive? I guess when you go to be with the Lord, then we'll be glorified. But maturity is a spectrum. Some older people, long in the tooth, are very immature in their thinking, and there's teenagers who are old souls. So maturity is not, there's not really like a defined kind of thing. But like I said, I tried to in the questions I asked, and I can send those to anybody who wants to see those in kinds of like ways to think about it, to examine yourself as well as examine the potential wife. Like I said, you never really necessarily feel ready. You should be humble enough to realize, like, I'm not all the way, ready to. Because like when you have all the requisite skills, you're probably going to like be 40 to 50, and I don't think that you should wait that long. Yes.
I have just a quick comment based on. So I think there's a paradox between like becoming a man who's ready for marriage, and also realizing that the woman is a helper to that, to make that marriage happen. So I like how you said, like, when you were in college, that you were glad that your in-laws said that they didn't expect you to, or their daughter to finish.
Right.
Because
she did finish. She graduated. She just we didn't
to
marry,
finish
yeah.
before you got married.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and I think that idealism can be debilitating, and it doesn't need to be like that, because if you're both ready for marriage, but maybe you're working towards like certain things, or let's say you have a job but like you don't have a house, and I have to get the house before. It actually might be good to get a house before you get married, because then it's the one you get to pick it, and she doesn't have. You don't have a second opinion. But at any rate, that's up to you to decide. But did I say that out loud? No, but I do think that, like, you might find in your process of becoming the man that you want to be, that, hey, I found a woman, he who finds a wife finds a good thing. and it looks like we're ready to get married. Do we need to wait so long? And well, I really want to do all these things. Well, maybe if you get married, she can help you do those things. So it doesn't need to be like either or necessarily.
Right, yeah. Like I said, marriage will make you into who you each other are. And if you grow up together, like I said, because you're married young, that helps. Rather than like when you're older, you have like, you're set in your ways, you have like ways that you expect things to go. And that was even hard for me, because I mean, I'm a very kind of like, I'm design, like I like to, you know, I was used to living my own life on my own terms and liking the things I like. You gotta let your wife decorate. And she has a particular way that she's gonna want to fold the towels. So let her do that and adapt to her way on the towel thing. Give a little bit, guys. Okay, that's it. I'm past my time.